Hi and welcome to Dusty Book Sniffers. I'm Nicole and today we're here to talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So let's get into it. Well, good morning or good evening, everybody, no matter where you're watching from. Thank you for taking some time out of your day and spending it with me while I prattle on about the books that I have read. So today we are here to talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I love this book, absolutely love this book. It has 260 pages. It was first published in 1818 and I read it in both audio and physical, so I did immersive reading. I absolutely love reading classics like this. It just gives me so much more to the story and the wording and all that sort of stuff. The genre that this book falls into is classic gothic sci-fi, and I gave it a 5-star rating. So that gives you a sort of an idea of what review is coming. So first of all, I'm just going to say, have you ever picked up a book where you have read it and you've read it so quickly and then you close that book and you just think, oh my God, why have I not read this book before? Frankenstein is actually that book for me. And let's just talk about this cover and this beautiful book. This is a cloth-bound classic, so this is part of my collection. You can see them up behind me. It's getting bigger and bigger every day. So I got this one because I was reading it as a group read with Read Fine Books, and I'll link her channel down below as well. But this book, I don't know why I've seen adaptations, movie adaptations and stuff like that as I've grown up, but I don't know why I have never read this book. If they had have given this book to me in English at school and said, read this book, I would have fallen in love with classics so long ago. Like, I would have been reading all the classics, but have read them all by now. Well, most of them. But yeah, I just do not know why they do not study this book in school. They don't here in Australia. They may do in other countries, but here in Australia and the school that I went to, they didn't. And I've asked Savannah if they do, and she hasn't at her school either. So yeah, but this book, I read it from cover to cover, and as I said, I listened to it. I done it in one sitting in one day. I could not put this book down. Brendan was talking to me and we kept going, shh, I don't want to talk to you, I'm reading a book right now. He's getting quite snippy at me and I was getting snippy back at him, like, can you see I have a book in my hand, stop talking to me. That's sort of how it went on that particular day. But I just could not, and I wanted to read it again, like straight away. I wanted to reopen it up and read it straight away, but I had so many other books that I had to read, so I had to put it down. So this is actually gone onto my reread list. There's a couple of books that I've started a list of books that I want to reread, in the classics, that is. So I tried to reread Dorian Gray, even though I liked that book to begin with. The second time round, I didn't like it as much, and I think that that's nothing against the story. That was just me in general. Time was a strain at that particular time, and also I just wasn't in the right frame of mind. And so, but this has definitely gone onto the list, and the other two that have made it onto the list so far is, A Christmas Carol's always been on the list. I always read that by Charles Dickens. And so Frankenstein's now on it, and Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen and Persuasion are also on my rereads. And I sort of, whether I read them every year, I don't know, but this one is up there with A Christmas Carol. This one, I'm thinking every October I'm going to read this. This is going to be my October read. So October's coming up soon, so I'll be able to read it in a couple of months again. I just think it's absolutely fabulous. So basically, the book is set in Switzerland and also in London, and the time frame in the book is from 1816 to 1817, and it is following the main character in this is Victor Frankenstein, and also the other main character is also the creature that he creates. Okay, so the book starts out with, what was his name? Robert? What, you think I'd remember it considering the book starts out with that. So Robert Walton, I think his name was, and he's writing a series of letters. He's on a ship, and he's in the up in the North Pole region, and basically he is surrounded by ice and he can't go anywhere. And so he's writing a series of letters to his sister, and he's talking about the things that he's seeing and all that sort of stuff. And then he talks about the day that he's seen him and his crew seen this 8-foot tall beast going past, or man, they didn't say beast, man going past on a sled with dogs. And then a short time later, they seen an average sized man going in the same direction. So that sort of sets the story up for where we get to and how we get to find out about this story. And then sometime later, they pull Victor Frankenstein out of the water. He's on his sled, and I think there was one dog left, but anyway, that's irrelevant. And so they pull him out of the water, and he's quite ill and stuff like that. And so they take him in, they warm him up, they feed him, they give him a bed to recuperate in. And while he's recuperating, he is telling the story to Robert Walton, who's the captain of the ship. And so the story flows on from there, and basically it's highlights. I don't know. I don't know what I took away from this, apart from you shouldn't play God, for one. You got no business messing with the laws of nature, for one. And subsequently, that is sort of what it is about. So Victor Frankenstein is a young man when the story starts as well, and he is from a wealthy family that live in Geneva in Switzerland, and he goes to study abroad, and he is fascinated by science and all things in science, but he's particularly fascinated with natural science. So that's sort of where he goes in his life, and he heads off over to England to study at the university there, and he becomes self-absorbed and trying to essentially recreate life. And and so it covers the topics of isolation, again, isolating himself from his peers and isolating himself from his family, because he's become obsessed with creating this creature. He goes to the cemetery and he's getting bits and pieces. Like, it's a little bit dark, like really dark, actually, when you think about it. So he gets bits and pieces, and then he goes about the business of creating this creature. And then one rainy night, this creature comes alive, and Victor Frankenstein is so shocked and appalled and repulsed by this creature because it's so ugly and it's 8 foot tall. Like, he had a ruler would have been handy. He didn't really have to make him 8 foot tall. Anyway, he made him 8 foot tall. And basically, so basically he was appalled and disgusted by this creature, and so he should be, because it was made out of dead body parts. And he fled, and so the monster is disorientated and not knowing what's going on, because essentially now this creature has just been born. He doesn't know anything about his surroundings. He doesn't know anything about what he's supposed, like what we know or anything like that. So essentially you have this 8 foot tall infantile beast, and so the story flows on a little bit from there. And so Victor has run away, and then his really good friend Charles, I think his name was, comes across him and then nurses him back to health. There is a couple of points in the book, in like timeline, that didn't quite match up, but anyway, that's probably me just being nitpicky. But anyway, there's a couple of little spots in there that I'm thinking, hang on a second, isn't it? That can't be a year later. So yeah, it's only about a 6 month difference, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So basically his friend Charles finds him, and then and Victor is quite ill, and so he nurses him back to health. And of course he's been neglecting his family, so his family's very worried, and most of the voice in this is Victor. And then every now and again you will get the voice of Elizabeth comes into it. Now, Elizabeth and Victor are betrothed and essentially are going to marry one another eventually, but he's off studying and all that sort of stuff, and so he's quite withdrawn from his family, and they're worried about him. So Elizabeth is sending him letters and stuff like that, so her voice comes into it. Now, after this incident where he's recuperating and whatnot, the monster has somehow gone out into the world, and he went to one village and they were repulsed from him. So everybody essentially shunned this monster because they were repulsed by him, his ugliness, his time, like his size, not able to communicate properly. And he basically survived on nuts and berries. And eventually he found his way through some woods into a little cabin, and there was a place where he could rest. And he found that he was hidden from them, but he could see through a crack, and he could see this family. And it was here that he learned what, how to speak and formulate words, and also how to treat people. And so he started to learn right from wrong and how these people looked after one another. And while he was there, he'd done all these little things for them. So he went and collected wood for them and drop it so they didn't have to do it, because he could see how busy they were and all that sort of stuff. And he watched them for quite some time. And so eventually he worked up the courage and he read a couple of books, and I can't remember the names of the books off the top of my head, and I didn't write that down. He read a couple of books, and as he was reading these books, and he was learning to communicate, and he was learning words and all this sort of stuff, and witnessing this family in their day-to-day living, he was starting to become more resentful towards Victor, who created him. And so the question that kept coming to mind is, what the hell was Victor thinking? And how could he just abandon, no matter how repulsive or scared or whatever, you created it, you're responsible for it. He basically skirted away on his responsibilities. Like he may not have given birth to it, but he still created this beast, and he was responsible for this beast. He was the parent of this beast, essentially. And it really ticked me off that he did this. And this poor beast, I did feel sorry for him, at the same time as I was getting cranky with him as well, because the way the book portrayed that he had learnt so much from watching this family and all the rest of it, essentially he knew right from wrong. So after he tried to approach this family, because after some time he decided to approach the family, but he decided to approach the father first because he was blind, so he wouldn't be repulsed by his figure, his disfigurement of his face and his grandeur and all that sort of stuff. So basically he went in, but then the young couple, the other family members came back, and there was a young Arabian woman living with him by this time. So that's how he learnt to speak words, because the young gentleman of the house was teaching this Arabian woman how to speak, and that's how he was learning. But they were French, so he must have been learning French, not English. But anyway, subsequently, he approached the father, and they came back early. They were repulsed by him, and they fled, and he fled, and then he ran away, and then he came back and they had gone, and he destroyed the house, and then he left for Geneva because he had worked out by having he had notes and stuff in his pocket, and he worked out where he was in Geneva. And so he made his way to Geneva, and then he come across a young boy, and he was basically, which was Victor's little brother, and he had a locket around his neck, and basically the monster ended up killing this young boy because he started screaming and whatnot. And so then he took the locket and he dropped it into the maid's apron, and so she was found, after looking for him all night, she was found in a barn and had the locket on it. So she was accused of murdering Victor's younger brother. He got word of this in England, and then he made his way back to Geneva, and from Elizabeth, and made his way back to Geneva, and realised that it was the monster that killed his brother. So after he lost his brother, his mother had passed away earlier on in the book, he lost his brother to the monster, and then the monster had framed the maid of their house, who they were all very close to, and she was and then he essentially had to watch her die because she was executed for the murder of William. So fast forward a little bit, and he ends up going up into the Alps. The family takes some time off, and he goes off by himself up into the Alps, where he comes across the monster. The monster sits him down, and then this is where the monster's voice comes in and starts telling the story, and he tells you all that stuff that I just told you about, and then some more, about how he ended up where he ended up and why he's ended up the way he is. And he puts it to Frankenstein that he needs to make him a mate so he's not lonely. If he does that, he'll go to South America and he'll never see him again. If he doesn't, he will kill people. So essentially blackmailing Victor into making another creature. And while Victor doesn't want to do this, he reluctantly agrees. And then him and his best friend Charles, they go on an extended journey across many continents and end up in the north of England, and basically he starts creating the monster, a mate for the monster, and the monster is following along all this time. And basically he feels like that he's feeling like backed into a corner at this point, and decides that he's not going to do this. And so once he decides that he's not going to do this, then the monster says, I'll be with you on your wedding night. And he gets rid of the other creature that he was creating, and he fell asleep in the boat, and he ends up in Ireland, and then he's accused of killing his friend Charles. But they weren't together. He became somewhat from what I can understand, he seemed like he was mentally ill because he was starting to see things, hear things, and think things, and become very paranoid. And I think he was suffering from some form of mental illness, although it wasn't speculated in this. It was speculated, but it wasn't definitive that that was the problem. It was just speculated. And so so that sort of went on. It turns out that he didn't, and then he ends up back in Switzerland, and he marries Elizabeth, and so we get to the point where we're at the end of the book, and I'm not going to tell you anything more past that because you need to read this. And there's so much more going on in this short book of 260 pages. There are so many nuances to the story that I'm not even touching on at the moment. Like, as I said, there is some speculative, like I feel that there is a little bit of mental illness being touched on in here, and there's loneliness and all that sort of stuff. And Shelley just writes a great story. Like, she really punched it home, and I could feel how the monster was feeling. I could feel how torn and conflicted Victor was feeling on that. But, you know, there are consequences for your actions, people. You shouldn't play around with the laws of nature, and you definitely shouldn't be playing God. No, because no good can come of it. If you haven't read this book, I highly do recommend that you read this book. And again, I'm going to say listen to the audio with it, because the narrator of the one that I listened to, which was free through Audible, and I'll leave all the information down below for you, was absolutely phenomenal. And I will try and find a link for this, because last time I looked I couldn't find it. I'll see if I can find it again and leave a link down there for this particular copy. But that is it from me today. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up down below. If you're a returning viewer or a new viewer and you've yet to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it, and then that way you're not going to miss out on any future bookish uploads. But that's it from me today. Have a wonderful day. Hope you get lots of reading in, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.